Sorry, gentlemen, just at the outset, small announcement. I am relatively sick, meaning I'm quite congested and have a sore throat, so if my voice sounds off or weird, that is the reason. Anyway, let's continue on to the video. For the longest time, essentially all of humanity's time on Earth, there was but one reality. Reality everyone shared. Of course, many people imagined there might be other realities, but it wasn't until very, very recently that the concept of an alternative reality that actually had some traction emerged. Now, you might have heard the term hyperreality before. It's one of those postmodernist, post-structuralist terms that somebody came up with. His name was Jean Baudrillard in English, or Jean Baudrillard en français. But saying that aside, he came up with this idea of hyperreality, which is basically this concept that refers to different notions of reality with respect to signs and symbols, and then in conjunction with that, how somebody reaches a consensus on reality itself. Now, when he was around, this philosopher Jean Baudrillard, he had not yet experienced the internet. Indeed, he passed away when the internet was relatively young. So most of his notions of hyperreality with respect to technology come from television, advertising, radio, and just propaganda more broadly. But just like a broken clock can be right twice a day, so too can postmodernists and post-structuralists be right about certain things they've claimed. And I think in some respect, Jean Baudrillard was correct about an alternative reality that imposes itself on the actual reality we inhabit. Now, I'm going to make the bold claim that although there had been but one reality for the longest period of time, and then with modern technology in the 20th century, say early mid-20th century, changing that slightly, we move up to the current era, mid-2024, and I find it very easy to argue that we have three different realities. On the one hand, we have the reality we've always had, the reality which requires you to eat, take dumps, sleep, do your work, exercise, take a walk in the park, look at the birds, whatever. That's the one reality. Then you have the internet, which is a reality unto itself, but it is somewhat separate from actual live reality. And then you have hyperreality. Now, the hyperreality that has emerged from the internet is very strange, but it's also real. It has real-world implications. So let's talk about these three different realities. In the normal standard reality, we'll call it the reality of life, everything is more or less the same. And so if you need to go shopping for groceries, you do that. You need to fill up your tank at the gas station, you do that. You chit-chat with the neighbor about the weather. All very normal stuff. That is the reality of life. Then you have the reality of the internet, where you talk about things that are much more abstract, that seem a bit weird. They can range from the idea that UFOs have visited us multiple times, to discussions of, say, mass layoffs in the games industry, to discussions about the efficacy of certain vaccines, to the so-called trans debate, to any number of diet fads or ideas that are proliferated online. That's that reality. And most of the time, although increasingly less so, the things that occur on the reality of the internet stay on the internet. So where does hyperreality come into play here? Hyperreality comes into play when the internet has a large or significant influence on the reality we all inhabit, the reality of the living, of life. And like I said, for many things it doesn't apply. You need to do your grocery shopping, you need to chit-chat with a neighbor, you need to take your walk, whatever it might be. But there are many instances where it does. So let's take several examples. Wherever you might fall on the discussion about January 6th, and I honestly don't care and don't have a strong opinion of it, but a lot of people do, either right or left. The fact of the matter is that January 6th was heavily influenced by the internet, and arguably would have been impossible without the internet. And so the fact of the matter is, had we had not had an internet, the ability to organize an event like that, however you judge it, whether you think it's good or bad, irrelevant, could not have happened. That's a perfect example of hyperreality, the collision of the reality we inhabit, we live in, with the reality of the internet. Another instance of this would be George Floyd. When George Floyd died, had it not been for the internet, there would have been something local in Minneapolis, there would have been news coverage, but with the internet, it became an international phenomenon. You could find murals and paintings of George Floyd in Europe. You could find international coverage as well as obviously national coverage, and a deep, deep concern about the trial, not just as it applied to Minneapolis, but indeed globally. How did that happen? Again, an instance of hyperreality, the internet imposing itself on the reality we live in. Because if you had gone back to something like 1820, you never would have heard of any event along the lines of George Floyd. Another instance of this is the entire discussion and debate revolving around the Great Pestilence. Again, I don't have strong feelings one way or another about this. I sincerely don't. But a lot of people do when it comes to the you-know-what. And let's be honest, without the internet, the divisions between people would have been minimal. You get the internet and people are arguing, debating about, you know what, nonstop, left and right, about the lockdowns, left and right. And again, an instance of hyperreality intruding upon the common live reality based off the internet. And there are many more minor instances of this, be it trends or diet fads that people follow in real life due to internet influence, plastic surgery, things that happen on TikTok or Instagram leading to body dysmorphia and an assortment of eating disorders, and the list goes on and on and on. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. We are no longer able to achieve a common consensus for reality because the internet reality and the reality we live in do not always accord with each other. And when they don't accord with each other, you end up getting this hyperreality, this imposed reality that comes from the internet, but is then lived and experienced in the common reality we all share. And I think it's very important to consider the implications of this, broadly speaking. The broadest implications of this new hyperreality, this very weird hyperreality, is that we will never again have a consensus on our lived common reality, apart from the most basic of things, such as it's raining outside and you're experiencing the rain, and therefore you believe it's raining. Setting that aside, when it comes to medical matters, when it comes to matters of exercise, diet, and health, when it comes to political matters, above all political matters, when it comes to cultural matters, it doesn't matter anymore what is actually real and accurate. What matters is what the internet says, which will then filter itself into your consciousness and then superimpose itself upon you in the form of hyperreality. And I've listed a number of examples, but quite infamously, you might have heard of this guy, Matthew Walsh. He is a conservative pundit for the Daily Wire. And a couple of years back, he made some documentary on the whole trans debate. Now, I don't think the trans debate is super important. I just don't care. I have no interest in it. But infamously or famously, on Joe Rogan, he made the claim that millions of children in the United States were on puberty blockers.
How many people have had this done?
Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but if we're talking about the drugs, millions.
You're talking about hormone blockers?
Yeah.
Millions of kids have been on hormone blockers? Really?
I'm sure someone's going to fact check me on that, but my guess is that we're into the millions now at this point. Yeah, that would be my guess.
That's a very small number, if that's right.
It says over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents who started puberty blockers and had a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis.
This says it's kind of undercounted, but that
would be a big undercounting.
Less than 1,000 people a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess, hundreds of thousands at this, but I could be wrong.
Million sounds great.
Yeah, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
It's quite far off the mark. And this is what I mean. Things get ginned up on the internet to a degree that you lose track of actual accurate numbers, which is not to say on the internet these things are not important. When you consider things like woke culture, wokeness in gaming and entertainment, it's all very noticeable and real. How much of that impinges upon reality itself as we live it is a different question. The point I'm trying to drive home here is that whatever people think, the internet seems to take on, with each passing year, greater and greater importance in how you interpret reality and what you believe to be true. Again, not necessarily a pot shot at Matt Walsh, but you can't claim it's millions of people when in reality it's only 4,000 to 5,000. I'm just saying his claims aren't backed up by the actual numbers. But conversely, the actual numbers when it comes to anything, not just this issue, obviously, well beyond that, won't matter as much as the information and signaling you're getting online that is redirecting your brain in a way such that you have this hyperreality imposed on yourself. Another example is Tucker Carlson, whom I've never really liked or disliked, and these days more disliked, because I recently was watching him on Joe Rogan, and he made the most insane claims about evolution. He just straight out claimed that evolution is false.
But if evolution is real, and if there is this constant, I don't know, but it's visible. Like you can measure it in certain animals.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin is like kind of not true. Right?
In what sense?
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not. And
there's not a fossil record of transitionary species, like species that are adapting to its environment.
There's
and they
tons
develop...
of record of adaptation, and you see it in your own life. I mean, I have a lot of dogs. I see adaptation in dogs, through the litter to litter. But no, there's no evidence at all that zero, that people evolve seamlessly from a single cell amoeba. No, there's not. There's no chain in the fossil record of that at all. And that's why you don't actually hear people, you hear them make reference to evolution because the theory of adaptation is clearly, obviously true. But Darwin's theory's totally, that's why it's still a theory almost 200 years later. No, we have not found that at all.
And I already had some doubts about him as a figure. But when he said that, I thought, wow, I guess I can't believe anything he says. But at the same time, I am hyper-aware, no pun intended, hyper-reality, that a lot of people who don't care about evolution or don't know anything about evolution are just going to eat that up and believe it to be true just because Tucker Carlson, their favorite pundit, claimed it was true. And that's a perfect example as well. Tucker Carlson's mouthpiece on whatever the issue might be, and he might speak truth to some issues, although he absolutely was not speaking truth to the matter of evolution. His mouthpiece is more important as a source of information than any scientist, any historian, any doctor, anyone with credentials, you could say, anyone with any authority or experience, a mathematician. It doesn't matter. What matters is what Tucker Carlson says and the people that listen to him, because they will believe everything he says. They're not going to be able to parsimoniously pick apart what's true and what's not, because everyone speaks some truth and some falsehood. They're just going to full throttle blanket accept everything that Tucker Carlson says. But what does this mean for us going forward? Well, quite simply, it means that, again, living in separate lived reality is partially because of the hyperreality imposed upon us by the internet, and because of the internet and its effects, a lack of desire to associate with people IRL, because ultimately, as the internet becomes more important in terms of our psychology, we will be increasingly drawn to corners and pockets of the internet that seem most important and relevant to us. In the process, we will shun reality because it does not offer us the things that we think accord with our perception of reality. I think these are kind of grim times because there's a lot going on in the world, and if we cannot achieve any consensus on what's going on, we are 100% screwed. I think we're 100% screwed anyway, but if you want any shot at solving huge issues, whatever they might be, it's not going to be possible when the human population is divided into different camps who have completely, and I do mean completely different takes on reality itself, based on the information they get online, which then gets filtered into how they decide to actually live their lives. It's not good, but at least it will be fascinating to observe as the years go by. As always, thank you for tuning in. Many special thanks to my patrons and donors on PayPal. You guys are the best. You keep the channel alive and going. Without you, all would be in vain. All would be dust and ash. As for everybody else, if you can leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, be much appreciated. Until the next time, if I'm still alive, I'll check you out then. May the gods watch over you. Bye-bye for now.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.